stream, and I will do this quickly. Present.
Okay, good. I can see that.
I'm going now.
Bye, Toria. Okay, so as you've heard, I'm Eleanor Ridley, and this is my presentation on owning feedback. So just to give you some context about me before I start, I was one of those really brittle, quiet children at school, high achieving, but not really very good at applying whatever I did. So, for example, one day I got 97% in a German test, and I went home and I cried my eyes out because I hadn't got that 3%. So facing feedback and failure was something that I found very challenging because as my limerick told you, my confidence was very low. When I left university, I was in a bit of a wilderness, didn't really know what to do with my life, and I went into museums, which I still believe are really amazing institutions, but I hadn't really got that passion yet. And then suddenly I worked with the outreach team and with children, and I also saw a Teach First advert at the same time and read up on all their videos and their information about why education is so important. And suddenly, bam, I had this real passion and something I wanted to be really good at. So a few months later, I was in the classroom and it was just such a disaster. I was one of the most inexperienced people in the cohort. I had done the requirements for Teach First for getting a placement, but it was a very different context. And I think teachers make their work look very easy to an outsider, but it's so much more than it appears when you visit in the classroom. So my first half term was just this whirlwind of confusion and mess, and I was not feeling good about where I was. I had a whole school inspection from our academy chain monitors, and they came in and they graded my first observation with them inadequate. Now, this was completely accurate. That was really accurate. I was still devastated, though. I knew it was true, but I was just heartbroken because I wanted to be in there helping to close the disadvantage gap, but actually I was not helping those children delivering what they needed. So, Toria, would you mind moving to the next slide for me? I spoke to my mentor, Penelope Webb, and told her about it the next day. It was really hard to go into work that day. And I went in and I spoke to Penny, and she was absolutely fantastic. She said to me, "That's not a reflection of the work that you have put in." And I thought this was just the most wonderful thing she could have said as a mentor. Because what she did there was show me that she understood how hard I had worked. We are such a hard-working profession. We all want to give 110% all the time to what we do because we know how important it is to be educators. But I think that can also make us quite brittle because we need that acknowledgement, and sometimes it can distract us from messages about how to improve. But Penelope was very careful to make it clear to me that she knew I was working hard, but she didn't compromise and tell me that it was any better than it was. It sounds tricky to handle, but actually it was a huge relief for me to kind of get that first step towards handling feedback, to be able to separate my effort and understand that was being acknowledged, but understand it was a different thing from my achievement. And she was always a very kind and supportive mentor who gave me lots of challenges, but the most important thing she did was help me accept that it was normal for me to be where I was and that we were going to work for me to get to the next step. So that was the first really crucial point of my feedback journey as a teacher. My next point, if you could move on to the next slide for me, Toria, that would be fantastic. The next kind of landmark moment was from Kyle Bailey. Now, he was my Teach First mentor because everyone in Teach First gets a Teach First mentor as well. And he said, "My role is to be a mirror in the room." And I thought that was a really interesting metaphor because I don't think we call it reflective practice for nothing. Mentors and mirrors, they say what they see. And in all the feedback I've had over the years, I can honestly say it has always been true. It has always been what was going on in my classroom, the feedback they've given me. I know I have heard some really horrible stories about people who have had quite stuff that's been made up, but in my experience, it has always been true. However, for new teachers, I think something to watch out for is that distortion. We all know about dodgy mirrors in changing rooms, ones that make us look amazing, and then we get home and we're like, oh, actually, I don't like this dress at all. And we know about mirrors that make us feel terrible about ourselves. And it's just the same with feedback. If you get feedback that's too positive, it can really affect your development quite negatively, because you don't know where you're at. And long term, you need that feedback for growth, and you need to know what your teaching looks like. And if it's too negative, you're just demotivated. So if you have feedback which you can tell there's a bit of a distortion on there one way or the other, be aware of it. There's also, we all as educators carry our own biases about different issues in education. So sometimes you might get feedback where you think, actually, I'm not sure if I agree with that. And obviously you have to follow the models and the policies within your school, but EduTwitter is a really great place to kind of find out about the big debates in education. For example, I had some feedback once about exploration-based learning, and I thought, I still don't know the answer to what I think about exploration-based learning, but EduTwitter has given me some really good examples of both sides of the debate on that issue. So getting connected with people, so you're widening your kind of feedback that way, is really useful as well. Tori, would you mind moving to my next slide? Lovely, thank you. So the next thing that I learned on my feedback journey was to invite feedback and observations. I was very lucky. I had 2 subject leads in my first couple of years, called Sarah Edwards and Kate Tilley. They were the English and maths leads, and they were out of class during maths and English. So they obviously had their own observation programme and their own things to do in that management time. But you could also ask them in to come and look at things that you found tricky. So for example, I asked Kate Tilley to come in and look at my problem solving. So she came in and had a look at my problem solving. I was having real difficulty getting the hang of how to teach problem solving well in maths. And I think most of us in primary education and probably secondary, we're still on that journey of becoming a really efficient problem solving teacher. And she had a good look, went away, had a good think about it, and came back and gave me some more tips I could follow up on. And she came in again a second time to kind of look at that and see how that was going. And what I loved about inviting the feedback in is that that kind of changed the dynamic for me. It became an exploration where I started to develop my own voice. I started to take some kind of control and get this energy about improving my teaching. It became this really pleasurable thing to invite feedback, to ask for it. And suddenly, failure and feedback just kind of became this very normal part of my teaching, and I've never found anything else that's so empowering. Just a note before I move on, Kate Tilley and Sarah Edwards must have been the most patient subject leads in the world, because I was going to ask them questions all the time. They both had a lot of work to do, and I was like, especially Kate, she was a full-time class teacher, and I would go in before she'd had a chance to set up her classroom for the day, asking her lots of questions, and she was never anything but 100% patient, which I think she deserves a medal for. So that's my third point, is invite the feedback in, take control of that development for yourself, and you will feel so empowered and you will start developing your voice. Could you move to my next slide, please, Toria? So my next point is about copycatting your colleagues. So my year partner, my first year, she was an NQT while I was a Teach First PGCE trainee, and she was just the most amazing behaviour manager I've ever seen. She's called Hannah Offord, and she was a wonderful year partner in many ways. We were both part of the John Hattie Visible Classrooms project, and you get lots of data and feedback during that project, and based on transcripts of your lessons. And we both had a different strengths, and I could see that behaviour management was a clear strength in the data that had come back for hers. And I thought, okay, how can I do what she does in the classroom? How can I take what she does and make it my own and part of my own practice? She was the most warm person, just as warm as a sunny summer's day, but she also had the precision of one of those diamond cutting glass tools. She gave children every single instruction really clearly and in lots of detail, so she made it impossible for them to fail and really easy for them to succeed. And that meant they had this wonderful confidence and pleasure in being in a classroom. So I think looking at what other people do, making it your own and talking to them about it is a really important part of finding your own voice as well, and appreciating other people and learning from them. Would you mind moving to my next slide, please, Toria? So my fifth point, this one, I'm going to talk about someone who's had a huge impact on my practice in relation to feedback and growth. This is about Catherine Bailey. Now, I don't know what teaching models everyone has at their school, what feedback models rather. There's a huge variety, and I think has quite a big spectrum from how much of a role the teacher has in it. Some, it's mainly led by the observer, and the teacher just kind of here's the end of it. You might be asked how the lesson goes, and you just give a little tiny bit of input at the end. I had with Catherine, it was based on a coaching model. I think it was from a book called Leveraging Leadership, but it's a long time ago now. And she was amazing at delivering it. She was also really new to this role, and she kind of hit the ground running with it. She was, again, a really positive person, really positive about what she could see in a classroom, very precise praise. But then she was also the most challenging person I've ever worked with, in that she was a fantastic critical thinker, and she'd come into the classroom and be able to pick out one thing that was going to really transform your teaching. But then in the feedback model, she would then ask questions about that. Rather than telling me what to do, she would ask me questions, and I would have to do the working out what to do next, what exactly the problem was and how to improve it. So that feedback model is obviously one where the teacher has a lot of ownership, and you hear a lot of the teacher's voice in developing their practice. I think one of the reasons this worked really well is I had complete faith in Catherine as a coach, because as I've said, I really trusted her critical thinking skills, and I trusted her as an educator. I trusted her integrity, and I trusted that she wanted me to be achieving and that she wanted the pupils to be achieving. I think she trusted that when I asked questions and when I talked about what we were doing, that I wasn't trying to be challenging. I just really wanted to understand what we were doing. So you might not be able to control the model that your school has chosen for a feedback model, but you can influence the relationship by trying to make sure that your mentor understands that you trust them to give you the feedback, and also to kind of develop their understanding, so that you understand if you question anything, you're not rejecting, you are exploring. So that is my big tip for my feedback dialogues. See what your role is in it and try and maximize that, so that you're getting as much as you possibly can from it. My final point, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, Toria, it's quite a basic one. When you were a new teacher, as I've said, I had a fixed mindset to start, and was probably too hard on myself a lot of the time. There's quite a few people who've kind of been there to chill me out when I was getting stressed. My Teach First partner, he was someone who did Teach First at the same time as me, in the same school, was in the same boat, and he is the most calm person, Josh Reed. He would just remind me, you're a trainee, learning is natural, and learning is what you're doing. You're going to make mistakes, you're going to improve. He was really realistic and a very kind person always. And being realistic about what you can achieve, being kind to yourself and to others, and being engaged in what you're doing. And if you're doing that, then you are already doing everything you can do to help you grow. So that is kind of the main story of the kind of main 6 moments in my very early career stages of helping me understand how feedback can help you find your voice, and how feedback and failure helps you kind of open up as a person and open up to growth and excitement. And to anyone who's starting teaching this year, you are so lucky. These first couple of years are the hardest in so many ways, but they're also the most exciting part of your career. So good luck to everyone who is starting this year, and hopefully you have found some interesting or useful reflection points in what I've said. And that's the end of my presentation.
Well, that was rather phenomenal, wasn't it? There was you looking all nervous to start with. And we also have you got your T-shirt on?
I do have my T-shirt on, yeah. I just couldn't read the laptop reach for the laptop and have my t-shirt on for you.
Yeah,
So here is
I
my t-shirt.
put my computer up so people can see the t-shirt. But no, absolutely phenomenal. And again, when you go back and look at the thread and see what everyone commented, you really struck a chord with so many people, because I think as an NQT, and I wanted everyone to think that I'd figured it out, and I didn't want to ask for help. I was terrified that if I said help, people go, oh, you know, she's a bit silly. She doesn't know what she's doing. Of course, I didn't know what I was doing as a new teacher. I was learning. And I loved what you said about invite feedback. You know, actually say, you know, I'd like feedback, and to build that relationship up with your mentor. Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous.
Thank you. I found it I think that was the moment for me where I was like, oh, I think my whole life got better because of that. Like being more open and honest as a person about that kind of things really helped me just become more transparent and more honest, which has been wonderful.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Abby Bayford said that it is, if I can click on them, she said, invaluable advice for teachers and mentors. She also said you were eloquent and candid.
Oh, well,
know.
it's come across more eloquent this time round than it has on my practice run, so that's good to hear. Thank you,
And
Abby.
Steve said, you know, fantastic. You do feel like you should have it all figured out after your training year, and you do. And I think that's such an issue. You know,
I think when I tell people, I say, oh, I just knew nothing. I was really rock bottom. I was such a mess in my first term. And people say, oh, no, I'm sure you weren't. It's like, no, really, I was. And I've come to terms with that a long time ago, that I was a mess. And people kind of, they don't, I think they're trying to be kind and polite, but I think it's so obvious. It's such a rich career. It's such a rich profession. There's so much to learn. How could you possibly learn it all and be good at it as you want to be in the first few terms? It's the most, as I said, I was one of those high achieving children, and I've never struggled with anything so much as I've struggled with teaching. It's been the hardest thing I've done, and obviously the best thing I've done as well.
Well, I think Miss Monaghan, you have absolutely helped her, Eleanor, because she's put, this was very useful, honest and inspiring. Thank you for quelling my pre-PGCE nerves. And I do
don't be nervous.
Anyone that's starting teacher training, you just need to listen to Eleanor speak about it again and again and again. So, Eleanor, I'm waiting